The Expedition of Humphry Clinker. By Tobias Smollett. To Miss Willis at Gloucester. Bath, April 26. My dearest companion, the pleasure I received from yours, which came to hand yesterday, is not to be expressed. Love and friendship are, without doubt, charming passions, which absence serves only to heighten and improve. Your kind present of the garnet bracelets, I shall keep as carefully as I preserve my own life, and I beg you will accept, in return, my hard housewife, with the tortoise-shell memorandum book, as a trifling pledge of my unalterable affection. Bath is to me a new world, all is gaiety, good humor, and diversion. The eye is continually entertained with the splendor of dress and equipage, and the ear with the sound of coaches, chairs, and other carriages. The merry bells ring round, from morn till night. Then we are welcomed by the sunny waits in our own lodgings. We have music in the pump room every morning, cotillons every forenoon in the rooms, balls twice a week, and concerts every other night, besides private assemblies and parties without number. As soon as we were settled in lodgings, we were visited by the master of the ceremonies, a pretty little gentleman, so sweet, so fine, so civil, and polite, that, in our country he might pass for the Prince of Wales. Then he talks so charmingly, both in verse and prose, that you would be delighted to hear him discourse, for you must know he is a great writer, and has got 5 tragedies ready for the stage. He did us the favor to dine with us, by my uncle's invitation, and next day squired my aunt and me to every part of Bath, which, to be sure, is an earthly paradise. The square, the circus, and the parades, put you in mind of the sumptuous palaces represented in prints and pictures, and the new buildings, such as Prince's Row, Harlequin's Row, Bladude's Row, and 20 other rows, look like so many enchanted castles, raised on hanging terraces. At 8 in the morning, we go in dishabille to the pump room, which is crowded like a Welsh fair, and there you see the highest quality, and the lowest tradesfolks, jostling each other, without ceremony. Hail fellow, well met. The noise of the music playing in the gallery, the heat and flavor of such a crowd, and the hum and buzz of their conversation, gave me the headache and vertigo the first day, but, afterwards, all these things became familiar, and even agreeable. Right under the pump room windows is the King's Bath, a huge cistern, where you see the patients up to their necks in hot water. The ladies wear jackets and petticoats of brown linen with chip hats, in which they fix their handkerchiefs to wipe the sweat from their faces, but, truly, whether it is owing to the steam that surrounds them, or the heat of the water, or the nature of the dress, or to all these causes together, they look so flushed, and so frightful, that I always turn my eyes another way. My aunt, who says every person of fashion should make her appearance in the bath, as well as in the Abbey Church, contrived a cap with cherry-colored ribbons to suit her complexion, and obliged Win to attend her yesterday morning in the water. But, really, her eyes were so red, that they made mine water as I viewed her, from the pump room, and as for poor Win, who wore a hat trimmed with blue, what betwixt her wan complexion and her fear, she looked like the ghost of some pale maiden, who had drowned herself for love. When she came out of the bath, she took us a foetida drops, and was fluttered all day, so that we could hardly keep her from going into hysterics, but her mistress says it will do her good, and poor Win curtsies, with the tears in her eyes. For my part, I content myself with drinking about half a pint of the water every morning. The pumper, with his wife and servant, attend within the bar, and the glasses, of different sizes, stand ranged in order before them, so you have nothing to do but to point at that which you choose, and it is filled immediately, hot and sparkling from the pump. It is the only hot water I could ever drink, without being sick. Far from having that effect, it is rather agreeable to the taste, grateful to the stomach, and reviving to the spirits. You cannot imagine what wonderful cures it performs. My uncle began with it the other day, but he made wry faces in drinking, and I'm afraid he will leave it off. The first day we came to Bath, he fell into a violent passion, beat 2 blackamoors, and I was afraid he would have fought with their master, but the stranger proved a peaceable man. To be sure, the gout had got into his head, as my aunt observed, but, I believe, his passion drove it away, for he has been remarkably well ever since. It is 1,000 pities he should ever be troubled with that ugly distemper, for, when he is free from pain, he is the best-tempered man upon earth, so gentle, so generous, so charitable, that everybody loves him, and so good to me, in particular, that I shall never be able to show the deep sense I have of his tenderness and affection. Hard by the pump room is a coffee-house for the ladies, but my aunt says, young girls are not admitted, insomuch as the conversation turns upon politics, scandal, philosophy, and other subjects above our capacity, but we are allowed to accompany them to the booksellers' shops, which are charming places of resort, where we read novels, plays, pamphlets, and newspapers, for so small a subscription as £1 a quarter, and in these offices of intelligence, as my brother calls them, all the reports of the day, and all the private transactions of the bath, are first entered and discussed. From the bookseller's shop, we make a tour through the milliners and toymen, and commonly stop at Mr. Gill's, the pastry cook, to take a jelly, a tart, or a small basin of vermicelli. There is, moreover, another place of entertainment on the other side of the water, opposite to the grove, to which the company cross over in a boat. It is called Spring Garden, a sweet retreat, laid out in walks and ponds, and parterres of flowers, and there is a long room for breakfasting and dancing. As the situation is low and damp, and the season has been remarkably wet, my uncle won't suffer me to go thither, lest I should catch cold, but my aunt says it is all a vulgar prejudice, and, to be sure, a great many gentlemen and ladies of Ireland frequent the place, without seeming to be the worse for it. They say, dancing at spring gardens, when the air is moist, is recommended to them as an excellent cure for the rheumatism. I have been twice at the play, where, notwithstanding the excellence of the performers, the gaiety of the company, and the decorations of the theatre, which are very fine, I could not help reflecting, with a sigh, upon our poor homely representations at Gloucester, but this, in confidence to my dear Willis, you know my heart, and will excuse its weakness. After all, the great scenes of entertainment at Bath, are the 2 public rooms, where the company meet alternately every evening. They are spacious, lofty, and, when lighted up, appear very striking. They are generally crowded with well-dressed people, who drink tea in separate parties, play at cards, walk, or sit and chat together, just as they are disposed. Twice a week there is a ball, the expense of which is defrayed by a voluntary subscription among the gentlemen, and every subscriber has 3 tickets. I was there Friday last with my aunt, under the care of my brother, who is a subscriber, and Sir Alec MacKilligot recommended his nephew, Captain O'Donohan, to me as a partner, but Jery excused himself, by saying I had got the headache, and, indeed, it was really so, though I can't imagine how he knew it. The place was so hot, and the smell so different from what we are used to in the country, that I was quite feverish when we came away. Aunt says it is the effect of a vulgar constitution, reared among woods and mountains, and, that as I become accustomed to genteel company, it will wear off. Sir Alec was very complacent, made her a great many high-flown compliments, and, when we retired, handed her with great ceremony to her chair. The captain, I believe, would have done me the same favor, but my brother seeing him advance, took me under his arm, and wished him good night. The captain is a pretty man, to be sure, tall and straight, and well made, with light grey eyes, and a Roman nose, but there is a certain boldness in his look and manner, that puts one out of countenance. But I am afraid I have put you out of all patience with this long unconnected scrawl, which I shall therefore conclude, with assuring you, that neither Bath, nor London, nor all the diversions of life, shall ever be able to efface the idea of my dear Letty, from the heart of her ever affectionate. To Mrs. Mary Jones, at Brambleton Hall. Dear Molly Jones, heaving got a frank, I now return your fever, which I received by Mr. Higgins, at the hot well, together with the stockings, which his wife footed for me, but now they are of no service. Nobody wears such things in this place, O Molly. You that live in the country have no deception of our doings at Bath. Here is such dressing, and fiddling, and dancing, and gadding, and courting and plotting, O gracious! If God had not given me a good stock of discretion, what a power of things might not I reveal, concerning old mistress and young mistress, Jews with beards that were no Jews, but handsome Christians, without a hair upon their sin, strolling with spectacles, to get speech of Miss Liddy. But she's a dear sweet soul, as innocent as the child, unborn. She has told me all her inward thoughts, and disclosed her passion for Mr. Wilson, and that's not his name neither, and though he acted among the player men, he is meat for their masters, and she has given me her yellow trollopia, which Mrs. Drab, the manty maker, says will look very well when it is scoured and smoked with silver. You knows as how, yellow fits my fist's augmony. God he knows what havoc I shall make among the male sex, when I make my first appearance in this killing collar, with a full suit of gaze, as good as new, that I bought last Friday of Madame Frepona, the French milliner. Dear girl, I have seen all the fine shows of Bath, the Prids, the Squires, and the Circles, the Cratchit, the Hoptogon, and bloody buildings, and Harry King's Row, and I have been twice in the Bath with mistress, and ne'er a smoke upon our backs, hussy. The first time I was mortally afraid, and flustered all day, and afterwards made believe that I had got the headache, but mistress said, if I didn't go I should take a dose of bum taffy, and so remembering how it worked Mrs. Gwyllim up north, I chose rather to go again with her into the Bath, and then I met with an accident. I dropped my petticoat, and could not get it up from the bottom. But what did that signify? They might laugh but they could see nothing, for I was up to the chin in water. To be sure, it threw me into such a combustion, that I know not what I said, nor what I did, nor how they got me out, and wrapped me in a blanket. Mrs. Tabitha scolded a little when we got home, but she knows as I know what's what. Lord help you! There is Sir Jery McLegat, of Balnaclench, in the county of Callaway. I took down the name from his gentleman, Mr. Zero Frizzle, and he has got an estate of 1500 a year. I am sure he is both rich and generous, but you knows, Molly, I was always famous for keeping secrets, and so he was very safe in trusting me with his phlegm for mistress, which, to be sure is very honourable, for Mr. O. Frizzle assures me, he values not her portion a brass farthing, and, indeed, what's poor £10,000 to a barren knight of his fortune? And, truly, I told Mr. Zero Frizzle that was all she had trust to. As for John Thomas, he's a morass feller, I vow. I thought he would have fit with Mr. Zero Frizzle, because he asked me to dance with him at Spring Garden, but God he knows I have no thoughts either of one, or t'other. As for house news, the worst is, Chowder has fallen off greatly from his stomach, he cats nothing but white meats, and not much of that, and wheezes, and seems to be much bloated. The doctors think he is threatened with a dropsy. Parson Marifat, who has got the same disorder, finds great benefit from the waters, but Chowder seems to like them no better than the squire, and mistress says, if his case don't take a favourable turn, she will certainly carry him to Abergynwy, to drink goat's whey. To be sure, the poor dear Honimal is lost for want of exercise, for which reason, she intends to give him an airing once a day upon the downs, in a post-chaise. I have already made very creditable connections in this here place, where, to be sure, we have the very quintessence of satiety. Mrs. Patcher, my Lady Kilmacolloch's woman, and I are sworn sisters. She has shown me all her secrets, and learned me to wash gaze, and refresh rusty silks and bombscenes, by boiling them with vinegar, chamberlain, and stale beer. My short sack and apron look as good as new from the shop, and my pompadour as fresh as a rose, by the help of turtle water. But this is all Greek and Latin to you, Molly. If we should come to Abergynwy, you'll be within a day's ride of us, and then we shall see one another, please God. If not, remember me in your prayers, as I shall do by you in mine, and take care of my kitten, and give my kind service to Saul, and this is all at present, from your beloved friend and servant, W. Jenkins, Bath, April 20. To Mrs. Gwylym, housekeeper at Brambleton Hall. I am astonished that Dr. Lewis should take upon him to give away Alderney, without my privity and concurrence. What signifies my brother's order? My brother is little better than non-compush. He would give away the shirt off his back, and the teeth out of his head, nay, as for that matter, he would have ruinated the family with his ridiculous charities, if it had not been for my 4 quarters. What between his wilfulness and his waste, his trumps, and his frenzy, I lead the life of an indented slave. Alderney gave 4 gallons a day, ever since the calf was sent to market. There is so much milk out of my dairy, and the press must stand still, but I won't loose a cheese paring, and the milk shall be made good, if the servants should go without butter. If they must needs have butter, let them make it of sheep's milk, but then my wool will suffer for want of grace, so that I must be a loser on all sides. Well, patience is like a stout Welsh pony, it bears a great deal, and trots a great way, but it will tire at the long run. Before it's long, perhaps I may show Matt, that I was not born to be the household drudge to my dying day. Gwen writes from Crickhole, that the price of flannel is fallen 3 farthings an ell, and that's another good penny out of my pocket. When I go to market to sell, my commodity stinks, but when I want to buy the commonest thing, the owner pricks it up under my nose, and it can't be had for love nor money. I think everything runs cross at Brambleton Hall. You say the gander has broke the eggs? Which is a phenomenon I don't understand, for when the fox carried off the old goose last year, he took her place, and hatched the eggs, and protected the goslings like a tender parrot. Then you tell me the thunder has soured 2 barrels of beer in the cellar. But how the thunder should get there, when the cellar was double locked, I can't comprehend. Howsomever, I won't have the beer thrown out, till I see it with my own eyes. Perhaps, it will recover, at least it will serve for vinegar to the servants. You may leave off the fires in my brother's chamber and mine, as it is uncertain when we return. I hope, Gwylym, you'll take care there is no waste, and have an eye to the maids, and keep them to their spinning. I think they may go very well without beer in hot weather, it serves only to inflame the blood, and set them agog after the men. Water will make them fair and keep them cool and temperate. Don't forget to put up in the portmantle, that comes with Williams, along with my riding habit, hat, and feather, the vial of pearl water, and the tincture for my stomach, being as how I am much troubled with flutterancies. This is all at present, from yours, Tabitha. Bramble, Bath, April 26. To Dr. Lewis. Dear Dick, I have done with the waters, therefore your advice comes a day too late. I grant that physic is no mystery of your making. I know it is a mystery in its own nature, and, like other mysteries, requires a strong gulp of faith to make it go down. 2 days ago, I went into the King's Bath, by the advice of our friend C.H., in order to clear the strainer of the skin, for the benefit of a free perspiration, and the first object that saluted my eye, was a child full of scrofulous ulcers, carried in the arms of one of the guides, under the very noses of the bathers. I was so shocked at the sight, that I retired immediately with indignation and disgust. Suppose the matter of those ulcers, floating on the water, comes in contact with my skin, when the pores are all open. I would ask you what must be the consequence? Good heaven, the very thought makes my blood run cold. We know not what sores may be running into the water while we are bathing, and what sort of matter we may thus imbibe, the king's evil, the scurvy, the cancer, and the pox, and, no doubt, the heat will render the virus the more volatile and penetrating. To purify myself from all such contamination, I went to the Duke of Kingston's private bath, and there I was almost suffocated for want of free air. The place was so small, and the steam so stifling. After all, if the intention is no more than to wash the skin, I am convinced that simple element is more effectual than any water impregnated with salt and iron, which, being astringent, will certainly contract the pores, and leave a kind of crust upon the surface of the body. But I am now as much afraid of drinking, as of bathing, for, after a long conversation with the doctor, about the construction of the pump and the cistern, it is very far from being clear with me, that the patients in the pump room don't swallow the scourings of the bathers. I can't help suspecting, that there is, or may be, some regurgitation from the bath into the cistern of the pump. In that case, what a delicate beverage is every day quaffed by the drinkers, medicated with the sweat and dirt, and dandruff, and the abominable discharges of various kinds, from 20 different diseased bodies, parboiling in the kettle below. In order to avoid this filthy composition, I had recourse to the spring that supplies the private baths on the Abbey Green, but I, at once perceived something extraordinary in the taste and smell, and, upon inquiry, I find that the Roman baths in this quarter, were found covered by an old burying ground, belonging to the Abbey, through which, in all probability, the water drains in its passage, so that as we drink the decoction of living bodies at the pump room, we swallow the strainings of rotten bones and carcasses at the private bath. I vow to God, the very idea turns my stomach. Determined, as I am, against any farther use of the bath waters, this consideration would give me little disturbance, if I could find anything more pure, or less pernicious, to quench my thirst, but, although the natural springs of excellent water are seen gushing spontaneous on every side, from the hills that surround us, the inhabitants, in general, make use of well water, so impregnated with nitre, or alum, or some other villainous mineral, that it is equally ungrateful to the taste, and mischievous to the constitution. It must be owned, indeed, that here, in Milsham Street, we have a precarious and scanty supply from the hill, which is collected in an open basin in the circus, liable to be defiled with dead dogs, cats, rats, and every species of nastiness, which the rascally populace may throw into it, from mere wantonness and brutality. Well, there is no nation that drinks so hoggishly as the English. What passes for wine among us, is not the juice of the grape. It is an adulterous mixture, brewed up of nauseous ingredients, by dunces, who are bunglers in the art of poison-making, and yet we, and our forefathers, are and have been poisoned by this cursed drench, without taste or flavor. The only genuine and wholesome beverage in England, is London porter, and Dorchester table beer, but as for your ale and your gin, your cider and your perry, and all the trashy family of made wines, I detest them as infernal compositions, contrived for the destruction of the human species. But what have I to do with the human species? Except a very few friends, I care not if the whole was. Hark ye, Lewis, my misanthropy increases every day. The longer I live, I find the folly and the fraud of mankind grow more and more intolerable. I wish I had not come from Brambleton Hall, after having lived in solitude so long. I cannot bear the hurry and impertinence of the multitude. Besides, everything is sophisticated in these crowded places. Snares are laid for our lives in everything we cat or drink. The very air we breathe is loaded with contagion. We cannot even sleep without risk of infection. I say, infection. This place is the rendezvous of the diseased. You won't deny that many diseases are infectious. Even the consumption itself is highly infectious. When a person dies of it in Italy, the bed and bedding are destroyed, the other furniture is exposed to the weather and the apartment whitewashed, before it is occupied by any other living soul. You'll allow that nothing receives infection sooner, or retains it longer, than blankets, feather beds, and mattresses' teeth. How do I know what miserable objects have been stewing in the bed where I now lie? I wonder, Dick, you did not put me in mind of sending for my own mattresses, but, if I had not been an ass, I should not have needed a remembrancer, there is always some plaguy reflection that rises up in judgment against me, and ruffles my spirits. Therefore, let us change the subject. I have other reasons for abridging my stay at Bath. You know Sister Tabby's complexion. If Mrs. Tabitha Bramble had been of any other race, I should certainly have considered her as the most. But, the truth is, she has found means to interest my affection, or, rather, she is beholden to the force of prejudice, commonly called the ties of blood. Well, this amiable maiden has actually commenced a flirting correspondence with an Irish baronet of 65. His name is Sir Alec MacKilligat. He is said to be much out at elbows, and, I believe, has received false intelligence with respect to her fortune. Be that as it may, the connection is exceedingly ridiculous, and begins already to excite whispers. For my part, I have no intention to dispute her free agency, though I shall fall upon some expedient to undeceive her paramour, as to the point which he has principally in view. But I don't think her conduct is a proper example for Liddy, who has also attracted the notice of some coxcombs in the rooms, and Jery tells me, he suspects a strapping fellow, the knight's nephew, of some design upon the girl's heart. I shall, therefore, keep a strict eye over her aunt and her, and even shift the scene, if I find the matter grow more serious. You perceive what an agreeable task it must be, to a man of my kidney, to have the cure of such souls as these. But, hold, you shall not have another peevish word, till the next occasion, from yours, Matt. Bramble, Bath, April. To Sir Watkin Phillips, of Jesus College, Uxon. Dear Knight, I think those people are unreasonable, who complain that Bath is a contracted circle, in which the same dull scenes perpetually revolve, without variation. I am, on the contrary, amazed to find so small a place so crowded with entertainment and variety. London itself can hardly exhibit one species of diversion, to which we have not something analogous at Bath, over and above those singular advantages that are peculiar to the place. Here, for example, a man has daily opportunities of seeing the most remarkable characters of the community. He sees them in their natural attitudes and true colors, descended from their pedestals, and divested of their formal draperies, undisguised by art and affectation. Here we have ministers of state, judges, generals, bishops, projectors, philosophers, wits, poets, players, chemists, fiddlers, and buffoons. If he makes any considerable stay in the place, he is sure of meeting with some particular friend, whom he did not expect to see, and to me there is nothing more agreeable than such casual re-encounters. Another entertainment, peculiar to Bath, arises from the general mixture of all degrees assembled in our public rooms, without distinction of rank or fortune. This is what my uncle reprobates, as a monstrous jumble of heterogeneous principles, a vile mob of noise and impertinence, without decency or subordination. But this chaos is to me a source of infinite amusement. I was extremely diverted last ball night to see the master of the ceremonies leading, with great solemnity, to the upper end of the room, an antiquated Abigail, dressed in her lady's cast clothes, whom he, I suppose, mistook for some countess just arrived at the Bath. The ball was opened by a Scotch lord, with a mulatto heiress from Street Christopher's, and the gay Colonel Tinsel danced all the evening with the daughter of an eminent tinman from the borough of Southwark. Yesterday morning, at the Pump Room, I saw a broken-winded whopping landlady squeeze through a circle of peers, to salute her brandy merchant, who stood by the window, propped upon crutches, and a paralytic attorney of Shoe Lane, in shuffling up to the bar, kicked the shins of the Chancellor of England, while his lordship, in a cut bob, drank a glass of water at the pump. I cannot account for my being pleased with these incidents, any other way, than by saying they are truly ridiculous in their own nature, and serve to heighten the humor in the farce of life, which I am determined to enjoy as long as I can. Those follies, that move my uncle's spleen, excite my laughter. He is as tender as a man without a skin, who cannot bear the slightest touch without flinching. What tickles another would give him torment, and yet he has what we may call lucid intervals, when he is remarkably facetious. Indeed, I never knew a hypochondriac so apt to be infected with good humor. He is the most risible misanthrope I ever met with. A lucky joke, or any ludicrous incident, will set him laughing immoderately, even in one of his most gloomy paroxysms, and, when the laugh is over, he will curse his own imbecility. In conversing with strangers, he betrays no marks of disquiet. He is splenetic with his familiars only, and not even with them, while they keep his attention employed, but when his spirits are not exerted externally, they seem to recoil and prey upon himself. He has renounced the waters with execration, but he begins to find a more efficacious, and, certainly, a much more palatable remedy in the pleasures of society. He has discovered some old friends, among the invalids of Bath, and, in particular, renewed his acquaintance with the celebrated James Quin, who certainly did not come here to drink water. You cannot doubt, but that I had the strongest curiosity to know this original, and it was gratified by Mr. Bramble, who has had him twice at our house to dinner. So far as I am able to judge, Quin's character is rather more respectable than it has been generally represented. His bon mots are in every whittling's mouth, but many of them have a rank flavor, which one would be apt to think was derived from a natural grossness of idea. I suspect, however, that justice has not been done the author, by the collectors of those quinina, who have let the best of them slip through their fingers, and only retained such as were suited to the taste and organs of the multitude. How far he may relax in his hours of jollity, I cannot pretend to say, but his general conversation is conducted by the nicest rules of propriety, and Mr. James Quin is, certainly, one of the best bred men in the kingdom. He is not only a most agreeable companion but, as I am credibly informed, a very honest man, highly susceptible of friendship, warm, steady, and even generous in his attachments, disdaining flattery, and incapable of meanness and dissimulation. Were I to judge, however, from Quin's eye alone, I should take him to be proud, insolent, and cruel. There is something remarkably severe and forbidding in his aspect, and, I have been told, he was ever disposed to insult his inferiors and dependents. Perhaps that report has influenced my opinion of his looks. You know we are the fools of prejudice. Howsoever that may be, I have as yet seen nothing but his favorable side, and my uncle, who frequently confers with him, in a corner, declares he is one of the most sensible men he ever knew. He seems to have a reciprocal regard for old squaredos, whom he calls by the familiar name of Matthew, and often reminds of their old tavern adventures. On the other hand, Matthew's eyes sparkle whenever Quin makes his appearance. Let him be never so jarring and discordant, Quin puts him in tune, and, like treble and bass in the same concert, they make excellent music together. T'other day, the conversation turning upon Shakespeare, I could not help saying, with some emotion, that I would give 100 guineas to see Mr. Quin act the part of Falstaff, upon which, turning to me with a smile, "And I would give 1,000, young gentleman," said he, "that I could gratify your longing." My uncle and he are perfectly agreed in their estimate of life, which Quin says, would stink in his nostrils, if he did not steep it in claret. I want to see this phenomenon in his cups, and have almost prevailed upon uncle to give him a small turtle at the Bear. In the meantime, I must entertain you with an incident, that seems to confirm the judgment of those two cynic philosophers. I took the liberty to differ in opinion from Mr. Bramble, when he observed, that the mixture of people in the entertainments of this place was destructive of all order and urbanity, that it rendered the plebeians insufferably arrogant and troublesome, and vulgarized the deportment and sentiments of those who moved in the upper spheres of life. He said such a preposterous coalition would bring us into contempt with all our neighbors, and was worse, in fact, than debasing the gold coin of the nation. I argued, on the contrary, that those plebeians who discovered such eagerness to imitate the dress and equipage of their superiors, would likewise, in time, adopt their maxims and their manners, be polished by their conversation, and refined by their example, but when I appealed to Mr. Quin, and asked if he did not think that such an unreserved mixture would improve the whole mass. Yes, said he, as a plate of marmalade would improve a pan of Sir Everence. I owned I was not much conversant in high life, but I had seen what were called polite assemblies in London and elsewhere, that those of Bath seemed to be as decent as any, and that, upon the whole, the individuals that composed it, would not be found deficient in good manners and decorum. But let us have recourse to experience, said I. Jack Holder, who was intended for a parson, has succeeded to an estate of 2,000 a year, by the death of his elder brother. He is now at the Bath, driving about in a phaeton and four, with French horns. He has treated with turtle and claret at all the taverns in Bath and Bristol, till his guests are gorged with good cheer. He has bought a dozen suits of fine clothes, by the advice of the master of the ceremonies, under whose tuition he has entered himself. He has lost hundreds at billiards to sharpers, and taken one of the nymphs of Avon Street into keeping, but, finding all these channels insufficient to drain him of his current cash, his counsellor has engaged him to give a general tea drinking tomorrow at Wiltshire's room. In order to give it the more éclat, every table is to be furnished with sweetmeats and nosegays, which, however, are not to be touched till notice is given by the ringing of a bell, and then the ladies may help themselves without restriction. This will be no bad way of trying the company's breeding. I will abide by that experiment, cried my uncle, and if I could find a place to stand secure, without the vortex of the tumult, which I know will ensue, I would certainly go thither and enjoy the scene. Quin proposed that we should take our station in the music gallery, and we took his advice. Holder had got thither before us, with his horns perdue, but we were admitted. The tea drinking passed as usual, and the company having risen from the tables, were sauntering in groups, in expectation of the signal for attack. When the bell beginning to ring, they flew with eagerness to the dessert, and the whole place was instantly in commotion. There was nothing but jostling, scrambling, pulling, snatching, struggling, scolding, and screaming. The nosegays were torn from one another's hands and bosoms, the glasses and china went to wreck, the tables and floors were strewed with comfits. Some cried, some swore, and the tropes and figures of Billingsgate were used without reserve in all their native zest and flavor, nor were those flowers of rhetoric unattended with significant gesticulation. Some snapped their fingers, some forked them out, some clapped their hands, and some their backsides. At length, they fairly proceeded to pulling caps, and everything seemed to presage a general battle, when Holder ordered his horns to sound a charge, with a view to animate the combatants, and inflame the contest, but this maneuver produced an effect quite contrary to what he expected. It was a note of reproach that roused them to an immediate sense of their disgraceful situation. They were ashamed of their absurd deportment, and suddenly desisted. They gathered up their caps, ruffles, and handkerchiefs, and great part of them retired in silent mortification. Quin laughed at this adventure, but my uncle's delicacy was hurt. He hung his head in manifest chagrin, and seemed to repine at the triumph of his judgment. Indeed, his victory was more complete than he imagined, for, as we afterwards learned, the two Amazons who singularized themselves most in the action, did not come from the purlice of Puddledock, but from the courtly neighborhood of St. James's Palace. One was a baroness, and the other, a wealthy knight's dowager. My uncle spoke not a word, till we had made our retreat, good to the coffee-house, where, taking off his hat and wiping his forehead, "I bless God," said he, "that Mrs. Tabitha Bramble did not take the field today. I would pit her for a cool 100, cried Quin, against the best shake-bag of the whole main. The truth is, nothing could have kept her at home but the accident of her having taken physic before she knew the nature of the entertainment. She has been for some days furbishing up an old suit of black velvet, to make her appearance as Sir Alec's partner at the next ball. I have much to say of this amiable kinswoman, but she has not been properly introduced to your acquaintance. She is remarkably civil to Mr. Quin, of whose sarcastic humor she seems to stand in awe, but her caution is no match for her impertinence. "Mr. Gwyn," said she the other day, "I was once vastly entertained with your playing the ghost of Gimlet at Drury Lane, when you rose up through the stage, with a white face and red eyes, and spoke of quails upon the frightful porcupine. Do, pray, spout a little the ghost of Gimlet." "Madam," said Quin, with a glance of ineffable disdain, "the ghost of Gimlet is laid, never to rise again." Insensible of this check, she proceeded, "Well, to be sure, you looked and talked so like a real ghost, and then the cock crowed so natural. I wonder how you could teach him to crow so exact, in the very nick of time, but, I suppose, he's game, aren't he game, Mr. Gwyn?" "Dunghill, madam. Well, dunghill, or not dunghill, he has got such a clear countertenor, that I wish I had such another at Brambleton Hall, to wake the maids, of a morning. Do you know where I could find one of his brood? Probably in the workhouse at St. Giles's parish, madam, but I protest I know not his particular mew." My uncle, frying with vexation, cried, "Good God, sister, how you talk! I have told you 20 times, that this gentleman's name is not Gwyn. Hoity-toity, brother mine," she replied, "no offence, I hope. Gwyn is an honourable name, of true old British extraction. I thought the gentleman had been came of Mrs. Helen Gwyn, who was of his own profession, and if so be that were the case, he might be of King Charles's breed, and have royal blood in his veins. No, madam," answered Quin, with great solemnity, "my mother was not a whore of such distinction. True it is, I am sometimes tempted to believe myself of royal descent, for my inclinations are often arbitrary. If I was an absolute prince, at this instant, I believe I should send for the head of your cook in a charger she has committed felony, on the person of that John Dory, which is mangled in a cruel manner, and even presented without sauce, o tempora, o mares." This good-humoured sally turned the conversation into a less disagreeable channel, but, lest you should think my scribble as tedious as Mrs. Tabby's clack, I shall not add another word, but that I am as usual yours, J. Melford.